Hello, guys. Welcome to this new edition of Mind Podcast. This is Aadit Kapadia, and together with me, I have my friend, columnist, fellow podcaster. Now I can officially say, because not only has he come on Mind Podcast, but Aashish Chandorkar is regularly on the Bharat Varta podcast that him and Roshan Karyappa run, and they have fantastic discussions on that. He's a columnist for Swarajya, Mint, various portals. What I do is I just follow Ashish on Twitter, and I know when his next column is going to be published, so I can read it. But we've made this into at least a biannual or an annual experience where we have Ashish on and we have a wide-ranging discussion on like various subjects. So welcome to Mind Podcast, Ashish.
Yeah, thanks, Aadit. It's good to be back here.
Absolutely. The goal is that we should have you do at least more episodes of Mind than you are on Bharat Varta, and then
of course, why not?
So, but do guys check out they do some great work there at Bharat Varta. So. Great to have you here, and it's been a very tumultuous week, right? In terms of if you talk about covering of India, like news junkies like us, because we normally focus on policy, politics, and things like that. And there hasn't been policy paralysis. There hasn't been any political uplifting. Yet this whole farmer march has created into almost a paralysis of governance on state side near Delhi and Punjab, where this is happening, where they are staging blockades and all. And we'll talk about the farmers' protest in a few minutes. But first, I want to talk to Ashish about why this happened. And that happened because of some large-scale agricultural reforms led by the Modi government, as restructured of the APMC and everything, which was placed by people like Ashok Gulati, Suchit Palla, many economists. So, Ashish, if you can give our folks a little bit of background on that, and then we'll go on to the current what's happening right now.
Yeah, sure, Adit. So let me rewind this a little bit, okay? Let's start in May of this year, which is when the PM and the finance minister were making the announcements pertaining to Atmanirbhar Bharat. This was in the wake of the pandemic, and the ask was that government would deliver certain fiscal stimulus and reforms. And that's when on 15th of May, in a series of announcements, the government had come up with 4 different things with respect to agriculture.
Absolutely.
The first one was that the government will invest up to 1 lakh crores in farm gate infrastructure, which would mean creating logistics facilities, transportation, post-harvest management, etc. All of that kind of stuff.
Right.
The second was that the government will abolish the Essential Commodities Act, or ECA, for most commodities. So basically, the rules around hoarding of agriculture commodity, who can create a warehouse and put things in that warehouse, etc. The stock limits, export limits, all of that will go away largely. And this was quite significant because, as we know, governments in India have fallen over the price of onion in the past. So government saying that we will not regulate the prices of onion was actually a fairly significant measure, or significant announcement, not yet a measure in its fullest sense. Then the government said that they will create a structure to bypass the existing APMCs, or Agriculture Produce Market Committees, which are governed by the states.
Right.
And let farmers allow interstate trade without the need of having to go to APMCs. And it also came with the riders that anyone can create a market yard, a warehouse, and all of this can be declared as mandis, where farmers can go and sell their perishable commodities or other crops.
Where a lot of things was controlled by the middlemen also, right?
Exactly, and we'll come to that. I think I'll talk about that a little
Sorry,
bit. But
I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go on. Yeah.
No worries. So that is one. And the fourth part was, of course, that the government will create a legal structure to allow aggregators, large buyers, retailers, and sellers to buy directly from the farmers. They don't have to go via the so-called mandi structure, or they can directly enter into contracts with the farmers.
Correct.
Now, all of this was already put into an ordinance on June 4th of this year. So 20 days after this was announced. So these laws, Adit, have already been in place for the last 6 months. Okay. 6-7 months now, basically. They were gazetted soon after the president gave the approval. What happened in September this month, in September, 27th September, I think, was when the government actually legislated this bill, because all ordinances have to be put to the parliament in 6 months to basically make them into laws. Of course, otherwise the ordinance have to be promulgated again or they lapse. So on 27th September, two bills were passed, which was the Farmers Produce Trade and Commerce Promotion and Facilitation Bill, which was essentially around the interstate trade, and the fact that the APMCs were no longer mandatory. Then there was Farmers Empowerment and Protection Agreement of Price Assurance and Farm Services Bill, which was around the contract farming, large buyers, etc. And of course, the Essential Commodities Act, which was amended, and the changes which were proposed were essentially put through in the act. So all of this happened like 6 or let's say 5 months after the laws actually being in force, right? And there was no opposition through June till September end. But the political part, of course, I mean, there weren't enough number of trades. Although, if you read some news reports in Financial Express by one journalist, Nanda Kasabe, who writes very lucidly on Indian agriculture, she has been hinting that in states like Maharashtra, this had already taken shape. I mean, this has already put some impact in the mandis, which is that the volume of commodities in mandis had already declined even through June, July, August. So things were already changing, but I think something triggered politically in September when the bills were presented in the parliament, and that is when the SAD walked out, opposing the bills, and they walked out of the NDA itself, the longest ally of the government. So I think the way it appears is that while the changes have already been in place, the opposition is largely political. There are, of course, going to be some issues, and we can discuss those issues. But I think the politics right now seems to be much more prominent than the actual impact the actual negative impact of the bill.
So it's interesting that Shiromani Akali Dal is what Ashish was referring to, where Harsimrat Kaur Badal was a minister, or chose this moment to leave the government, right? I mean, we could see that actually SAD was becoming sort of a liability for BJP in Punjab itself, because it was quite unpopular with the corruption allegations and so forth. But they did not seem to have an issue when earlier these legislations were talked about, right? They only seem to have started having an issue in September. So clearly that was the case. The second thing was, right now you see the farmers are marching, who I think they're from Punjab, UP, Rajasthan, parts of Haryana and Delhi, I think. So Punjab basically seems to have the most sort of things, and Amrinder Singh has said certain things. But you also have opportunistic cases where Aap Delhi has sort of supported these laws, and Aap Punjab is speaking in another line or something like that. So explain that dichotomy, right? That what the hell is happening? Are these laws actually being celebrated by parties who have nothing to lose politically, and then parties who think they might lose are suddenly being, oh, these laws are anti-farmer?
So I saw a news report yesterday which said that AAP had already notified these laws in the state on 23rd of November. Wow. But a week later, they said they are saying that they will, help the farmers by giving them food, etc., giving them shelter on the highways. So I think, of course, politics always wins in India in that sense. And I think political parties also know that good economics is also important. So they basically first do the right thing and then they oppose it after having done it themselves.
Yeah.
So I think that template seems to be work. I mean, Haryana is in the same boat in some ways, where ultimately the laws were. I mean, let's come to know what the specific issues are, right? So and why Punjab and Haryana have kind of got triggered more than other states. So see, essentially, we know in agriculture the way it works in mandis is that the mandis take a large cut of what the money which goes to the farmer. And essentially what the retail prices are.
Right.
The retail prices start getting jacked up because the mandis impose a lot of fee and levies and so on, right?
Right.
So as per various studies, let's say if I am buying something at a price of X, the farmer may only be getting 15%, 20% of X. Everything else is in the value chain. Now, this has resulted in this argument that middlemen are creating a problem. See, middlemen need not be demonized per se. They do play a role in the full. I mean, all trades have a middleman, right? If you buy a soap, even that goes via a series of middlemen. So middlemen obviously the point supply and demand cannot be matched. it's impractical for the buyer and seller to always be together physically to exchange the goods, right? So obviously you need middlemen. So as such, that itself is not the problem. The problem is that the exploitative nature of the monopoly of middlemen. It is not the middlemen per se, it is the structural monopoly which has been handed over to them by the government, which is a major issue.
Yeah.
The law said that you cannot trade anything outside the APMC. Now, of course, that happens all the time, but the prices, the minimum support prices are not guaranteed when you trade outside the mandis. Also, traders, the mandi traders themselves force small farmers to trade outside. So the way what middlemen were doing was they exploited it. Yeah, exactly. So what they would do is, let's say there's a harvest season. You know that the farm produce cannot stay good for more than say 15 days, 20 days, after which it will start rotting, for example, right? I mean, it depends on what commodity are you talking about. So, and also it is impractical for small farmers to load everything in a tractor, go to the nearest mandi 30 kilometers away, 50 kilometers away, and stay there for 20 days, right? So what the traders would do is that they would not buy from the small and the middle, like small farmers, small and the marginal farmers.
Yeah.
They will just say that some technicality is there, weighing machines are not working, your quality is not the right quality, any kind of nonsense will happen. And they will continue to buy from the large farmers who will get the MSP. Exactly. But when the small farmers' turn comes, they are queuing up in a mandi 3 days, 4 days. And when their turn comes, they would just be told that, for XYZ reason, we cannot be buying this. Now, what does that farmer do? The farmer has put a full season into, doing what the farmer does best, which is to grow the crop. But there's no buyer legally. Right. I mean, so either the person illegally sells it out of the mandi or sells the mandi itself, but at a lower price.
Right.
So the thing is, there has been an exploitative nature of this whole trade, which comes from the monopoly which has been given to the middlemen.
Right.
That monopoly has now gone away with this farmers. The mandis are not gone away. The middlemen are not gone away. Their monopoly has gone away. Right. So they are protesting against the non-monopolization, which is actually quite, let's say, anti-market in its opposition.
Right.
Now, politically, sorry, Aditya.
No. Go ahead. I was going to add to what you were saying. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No. So I was just saying that the APMC structures have never worked very well in most of the countries. In fact, the two states where they work very well are Punjab and Haryana. And that is so ironically, they are protesting because something is going to change which used to work well. And to that extent, it is a fair argument that, why should you tinker with something which is working? Yeah. But again, the thing is that no one is saying that APMC will not exist. The fact is that the mandi fee in Punjab and Haryana, there was a very good story in Economic Times by Aman Sharma around July, I think, where he mentioned that one reason why the major protests are happening in these two states is because the mandi fee was very high, 4%, 5% range, and the fact is that commission was going to the middlemen, the Adatyas, right? And now, if you can bypass that system, even if it is not, mandis will exist, but if you don't have to go to mandis, that 4-5% commission just goes away, which is essentially free cash which was accruing to them so far.
Absolutely. So
that is the major cause of the issue of the protests.
What I wanted to add to this was that basically, if you look at the whole argument from the sort of the farmers, where they talk about कि WTO में हमको concession नहीं मिला, some are saying that there will be too much privatization, or that we have to compete with cheaper import. Basically, they are saying that government should install adequate protection, and this is too much free marketism. Now, the irony is that 6 months ago, 1 year ago, not the farmers, but many intellectuals on TV studios who were standing with the farmers today were saying that Modi government is not free market enough. So,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. So how do you explain this dichotomy, right? I mean, ultimately, there has to be some innovation. We cannot just keep encouraging protectionism. This is not to suggest that, farmers ko jo bolna hai wo bolne do. We are not saying the government should run a metaphoric tractor through the whole thing. We have to balance the interests. But I think this is a fair reform what they have done.
No, of course. See, again, what happens other than the Indian political commentary is that a reform means anything which the government has not done. So whatever the government has done, even if it was a reform 6 months ago, stops being a reform as soon as it is done, because, well, it doesn't, there's still some things pending, right? So I think the what is a reform is a moving target in Indian commentary. So and as you rightly pointed out, people who have been for years tweeting about how India needs free markets as far as farmers are concerned, are exactly the same people who are not saying farmers need protection. They do not need free markets. So anyway, I think that's just the non-serious part of the commentary which happens.
Yeah.
But the fact is that I think the biggest announcements were not just these announcements. There was something in the budget also. To your point about technology and innovation, in the budget, the government had sanctioned 7,000 crores for creating 10,000 farmer produce organizations. So 7,000 crores will be provided by NABARD as loans or other banks through NABARD as loans for farmer FPOs. So the government had already put in a place a mechanism for farmers to come together to create a collective buying setup, which could be quite professional. Each FPO could be managed by marketing professionals, finance professionals. They can apply agri tech. They could get startups involved, all of that. And these these are all enabling factors, right? So it's not that a small farmer has to now go and negotiate with a Pepsi or a McDonald's or a Reliance Fresh, right? They can go do this via FPOs. And so that enabling mechanism was already in place, and the technology provision had already come in the budget itself. I mean, at least the structure of it. So these announcements were just a logical series of announcements. It's just that whenever something happens, people stop valuing the importance of it, right? That's how the political commentary in India, unfortunately, is that okay, you asked for Ram Mandir got done, so now it doesn't seem that important, right? I mean, while a whole generation of politics was actually concentrated only on Ram Mandir. So I think these reforms have also become a little bit like that for the commentariat.
Especially this week, you would only have discussions on whether a Ram Mandir would be built or not in the coming week.
Absolutely. Ideal time to not demonize a mandir itself.
Yeah,
right?
so this is why we have Aashish on the podcast. Without even knowing, he's going to stumble into some historical event that this happened this weekend. Like, chalo, ye discuss karo.
So I think Ashok Gulati wrote a wonderful article in May saying this is a 1991 moment for agriculture. It absolutely is in terms of the far-reaching impact.
And with due respect to Ashok Gulati, I agree with him. I think we also need to stop having 1991 moments. Maybe we need to have more 2020, 2021 moments, because whenever some reform is done, this is like, oh, this is a 1991 moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people forget that a lot of 1991 reforms were undone in 1993 by the same government. But
yes,
I mean, that's okay. At least we made a start. So people always forget a lot of, I mean, they tend to remember what they feel is right. And I think that's the advantage of having these podcasts, Adit, where you can go and question some of these assumptions which are quite popular in the general public.
See, again, Aashish unwittingly brings up that era from 91 to 93 and then talks about Ram Mandir also. It seems like everything we talk about has roots in 1993. So, but before we even get into that sort of the political thing, I've seen tweets about the Farmers' March by a few geopolitical analysts around the world, like Monty Panesar.
Yes.
So I don't know. I'm going to share my screen and sort of show our viewers what tweets they are. If you guys are listening to this on SoundCloud, guys, you might have to check on YouTube and see what is going on. So basically, if I were to show this is what Monty Panesar was talking about, right? Basically, what happens if the buyer says the contract, will cannot be fulfilled and the quality of crop. And then you had Ruby Sahota, who's an MP in Canada, saying that she rose in the parliament to urge the Indian authorities to stop violating the fundamental democratic rights. I don't think the Indian authorities are violating the fundamental democratic rights, but there seems to be almost a sort of a pattern to this, right? A lot of people from Britain and Canada who seem to have been talking about a certain referendum to happen in 2020, the same lobby is pressurizing a lot of these voices in Canada. It would seem, let me not attribute any motives, but it would seem the same lobby is pressurizing these people to say something.
Yeah, I think Ruby Sahota and Monty Panesar need to remember that Queen is no longer the head of the India, the country, the modern country. Yeah. They could have appealed to Justin Trudeau and to Boris Johnson to take away their subsidies of the farmers there, which in fact UK, Canada, US actually do have a lot of agriculture subsidies, which distort the international trade in favor of their farmers. So I think they, of course, have no clue what they're talking about. I just hope that they were. I just hope that some of these influencers, maybe not all, but some of them were actually paid for doing what they were doing, because I think that is the only explanation of these tweets.
Of this
the fact is that see, these are the type of events, Adit, which discredit the protests, right? I mean, I will not go as far as saying that this is a Khalistan protest, right? I think there could be genuine issues.
No.
And
Also, Monty even doesn't talk about Khalistan. He says Khali Satan.
Yeah.
If you get his old tweet from 2019, he says, there is a lot of enthusiasm of Khali Satan. Can Khali Satan happen? I tweeted about it. So,
So, it's not to say that these are motivated by a foreign lobby, but however, the problem is that these lobbies do get intermingled in the protests. And that kind of discredits the whole objective, right? So there could be genuine issues. I think what we need to remember is that no public policy will ever solve the problem, 100% of all problems of such a diverse country as ours, right? So there could always be some rough edges and things to be corrected and so on. So no issues in taking on board the right objections and fine-tuning the laws to make sure that the vulnerable sections are indeed protected and so on. But I think the moment you start having this global brotherhood, backing, trying to put international pressure on the Indian government as a mark of a diplomatic onslaught, I think that is when things get discredited. I think what's going to happen is that even if the Indian government was or could have considered putting up some provisions around MSP, etc., in a more liberal way in the laws, I think it's not going to happen now with all these people hijacking.
I find this insane. I cannot understand. Say the Black Lives Matter protests were happening in America. I would not have seen the Indian Parliament talk about it, debate about it. So this is, and this was a much bigger systemic issue that they were talking about. This is an issue related to India and what is happening in only 3 major states, right? Now, agreed, the concerns of the farmers, the government needs to go there, talk to them. And honestly, the government has communicated very well. That is one sore point where you and I, people like us, have always said that, the government must communicate better, Actually, they have this time communicated quite well. But it almost seems to be a misinformation campaign also going in simultaneous sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think on this issue, I don't agree on the objections around communication. I mean, the fact is that, see, in India, agriculture forms 15% of the GDP, but about 60% of the population is dependent on agriculture, right? So we're talking about close to, let's say, 70 crore people having something to do with agriculture in India or agrarian economy.
Right.
What we are seeing is a few thousand farmers protest or a few lakh people protest. But that's nothing in compared to what the actual size of the economy is. Exactly. Also, the protests are coming from states where the mandi fees were too high, which actually means that the protests are fueled not by the farmers but by the middlemen who are taking that mandi fee and whose monopoly is going to go away, right? In states like Gujarat or Maharashtra or even MP, where mandis are very powerful, but the mandi fee is not irrational. I mean, the mandi fee was already rationalized to 1%, 2%. Plus, there were intra-state mandi trading licenses like in Karnataka or AP, Telangana. There have been no protests because I think everyone understands that while interstate trade is allowed, it will be a fraction of the actual trade. What is going to happen is the farmers will still go to the mandi. It's just that a part of their produce can get better price realization. So I think most states understand there's a pragmatic view here.
And before someone digs up our old tweet and says, aap to Gujarat, Maharashtra, MP ki baat karoge since you represent 3 states. Yes, we do. But we also follow that states and other states very closely. So
this is why I think Karnataka, AP, Telangana have had some good farm changes as well in the last few years. So I think that they've also done quite well in terms of facilitating the intra-state movement at least.
No, because I actually got a lot of hate on this. So and I don't know why, because I was doing a lot of these threads during the Bihar election results.
Right.
And there were 7 states doing by-elections. So I typed the first 5 and then the next 2 years. Now, mera naseeb aisa tha that in the next tweet there was Telangana and Karnataka. And someone was like, how can you forget Karnataka? We also gave 26 MPs, 27. I was like, I know, I have not forgotten. Just go down and read my tweets. So I love my love for Karnataka and the cuisine of Karnataka knows no bounds, guys. So
I've actually had a reverse problem with that. So, like I had tweeted a few things which the BSY government had done fairly good stuff in Karnataka around liberalizing land laws and end use of land and so on. So a lot of the Gujarat BJP guys pounced on me saying that you have a problem with the Gujarat government, but not with the
Wow.
Karnataka government. I said, like, I mean, I have interest in neither actually per se. I was just tweeting what I found interesting newsworthy, nothing to do with the state as such.
It's for every opinion in India, there is always a counter
Counter
opinion.
opinion, of course.
Exactly. So as long as we are living in that, we're fine. So maybe
Yeah.
the Monty Panesars and the Ruby Salotas do need to say that we are talking about democratic opinions here, guys. But no, I mean, I saw like the Jagmeet Singh parties, uske 2-3 episodes. So many Brits and Canadians, Sikh voices have sort of started, and I don't think they're representative of the Sikh voices in India. So that is the most fascinating thing. It's just that you have a small percentage, say 1,000 verified accounts from Twitter will tweet, who are not representative of the crores in India, and they will sort of get amplified. And Barkha Dutt found that out the hard way, where she tried to
Correct.
interview this is he an actor? I don't know, but he refused to condemn Khalistan, refused to condemn Bhindranwale, gave some weird context, and even Barkha ended up fighting with him on air.
Exactly. And,
So-
and Barkha got a lot of flack by other journalists also for having quote unquote exposed the movement as such.
Exactly. It's like, oh, one bad apple is going to do this and so forth. But the ultimate thing is, if these people, if you have people in London, Canada, who are going to tweet in support of the movement, good. But then don't have dubious tweets about Khalistan, because then no one is going to take you seriously, right? Because that is make no mistake, that was a terror. What happened, what Bhindranwale did, that he was a terrorist. So no doubt about that. So moving on to the politics of this, and then that will lead to in the last third of the podcast, as I was saying, we'll go to the national politics and the impact. So it's always interesting that good economics may not necessarily be good politics at the time when the policies are being implemented, but good economics which results in jobs is always good politics. So how does the Modi government or any future government manage that? Does it mean that they have the first 2 years to pass as many reforms as they want and reap the fruits in the next 3 years?
Yeah, so specifically on the agri reforms, Adit, I actually genuinely feel that this can be a huge moment for a technology revolution plus job creation through FPOs, not because of the laws themselves, but what was announced in the budget, which is the 10,000 FPOs. Even if a fraction comes up, let's say 2,000-3,000, each of them can easily employ, between 20 and 100 people, depending on the size.
Right.
And it can create downstream jobs in terms of transportation, agri-logistics, all of that, right?
Right.
So I think there's a huge potential there, and also agri-tech startups can come in there in terms of the logistical. Basically, I mean, the problem is fairly simple. How do you keep something fresh and transported 2,000-3,000 kilometers and still be still serve it to the buyer, right? So that's I think the problem statement to solve on the logistics side. So there could be huge innovation possible there, both in the engineering domain as also in the technology domain. So as such, these laws will definitely be enabling once it settles down. Whether it settles down in the current form or not, we will know in the few weeks. But let's say 5 years from now, we will look back and say that this was a great moment. So as such, quite optimistic on the changes. Having said that, if you look at the more proximate politics of Punjab and Haryana, one issue which, if you look at Punjab, the politics is dominated by what the Jat Sikhs, right, which is about 20-25% of the population.
Correct.
Also in Haryana, historically, the politics was dominated by the Jats, and only now with the Khattar government coming in, BJP kind of deviated from that largely accepted path of how politics
run. Chief minister and so forth.
Exactly. So the thing is that it is also a moment where look at Punjab. If you look at SAD, Congress, AAP, all parties are reliant on the same lobby of about, which is only 25% of the population, but controls the state in a very, very strong way. I mean, they have a very tight grip on the state politics, policies, all of that. So it may also result in a counter polarization in that sense, which is that the Punjabi Hindu voters of Maharashtra, of Punjab, and also of the other Sikh voters who are not really in the power, I mean, who have really not tasted power as such.
Yeah.
They can also counter galvanize in other direction, and the only other direction right now is BJP.
And then you also have a lot of Dalit population in Punjab, and who are not particularly on the same terms as the Jat Sikhs who have been ruling Punjab. So there is, within the Sikh community also, there is a caste divide, so to speak.
Yeah. And I mean, I was saying that even in Maharashtra, this has happened where BJP has suffered because the fact is they were never able to break the Maratha politics,
Hmm.
and of course that is how they have not won the state in the in the local elections. I mean,
Yeah.
in the assembly elections. So I think the same issue has been there in Punjab and Haryana, but now in those states maybe there's a counter polarization possible because of this
Yeah.
protest.
And in
Uh,
Maharashtra, it's interesting because in 60 years since the formation of the state, 1960, the only 10 years when
exactly.
non-Congress government have been
Yeah.
power, 95 to 99 Sena BJP, and
Yeah.
2014 to 2019 BJP. अभी भी सेना पावर में है तो कांग्रेस के साथ है. So
Right.
that is sort of the thing what Ashish was
Yeah.
talking about. And as that government completes 1 year, and you have another different government in Bihar with an ascendant BJP, it's a very strange conundrum which we are entering into the India in the elections, because the next 5 states are very crucial to check how has the BJP expanded, so to speak, right? Or reaffirm the 2019 findings, where they did a spectacular performance in West Bengal, where they matched TMC essentially. I think BJP got 18 seats and TMC got 20 or 22. I forget the final number. So almost thereabouts. So can they match that performance in Bengal in the 2021 assembly elections? Then it's Assam. Can they come back to power? Tamil Nadu, where they are in alliance with ADMK, where they did very bad in the Lok Sabha, can they reverse that in the Vidhan Sabha? And then, Kerala, where the BJP has always seemed to have the 10-12% vote, but never been able to cross that threshold of 15. Last time they won their first Vidhan Sabha. So what is your sort of analysis? Of course, in the weeks to come, we'll do a detailed podcast on the states, but I just want to get the overview as we head into the elections.
Right. So let's look at these, name by name. I think Bengal, obviously, BJP is going all out with the assumption that it would be able to dislodge the
And
TMC
without a
government.
face.
Sorry?
Without one face. Like, I don't
Oh,
think
yeah, absolutely.
a face.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Kailash Vijayvargiya, who has helmed the campaign quite strongly. He's the National General Secretary in charge of the campaign. And I think the way politics is shaping up in Bengal, I mean, of course, there'll be the Bihar elections will certainly play a role there, because in several of the adjoining the areas where the borders are nearby or adjoin, etc., there's a lot of influence of the Bihari voters per se, right? So that was also seen in the Lok Sabha itself. But the seats which adjoin these other states, I think that the BJP will try to essentially capture that area very, very strongly. And it clearly appears that BJP has gone all out in terms of the campaign, in terms of the ground mobilization, because Bengal is not a state which runs on social media, etc. It's a very ground level politics there. So I think all of that the party seems to be quite well entrenched and very confident about. Assam is interesting because both Sonowal and Himanta Biswa Sarma have been very strong in their personal roles which have been given to them, and with the demise of Gogoi, Congress also doesn't have a very strong leader per se in the state, right? Like who's going to be at the helm of the affairs there.
Right.
So that has also, so I think the BJP should fancy its chances to retain the state. I mean, of course, there are issues pertaining to the ethnicities and the laws, etc., and some bit of, let's say, a variance between what the center wants nationally versus what the BJP voters of Assam want for Assam. But I think nationally the objectives are the same. Right. But I mean, how is that contradiction managed for the state? That would kind of determine the outcome, I guess, for the next election. TN and Kerala are like, what, as the Australian cricket team described, final frontiers when it comes to India. I think for BJP, those two states.
इस हफ्ते ऑस्ट्रेलिया इंडिया का एग्जांपल मत दिया करो. This is the very wrong week to give example.
Yeah, like I tweeted, we have improved between first and second ODI better than Australia. So hopefully we will win one of the T20s, maybe perhaps.
But here is the problem. We have improved, but Australia has also improved by 16.
No, we improved by more than them. I did a Congress type analysis of how the improvements happened.
Achha, so, you did what Chidambaram did in 2017 Gujarat.
Yeah, I mean, something like that.
We've improved our seats by 4. and BJP is down by 2. So Vinod Mehta said on Times Now that by this logic you will win your election in 2134. So
Exactly. So I predict one T20 win potentially in the later in the series. But I think getting back to TN and Kerala, I
sorry,
think
yeah.
yeah, I think the party BJP probably will try to look at winning some seats, potentially let's say 5 seats. But even that seems like an uphill task at this stage.
Correct.
Of course, in Tamil Nadu there's an alliance with ADMK, so if that alliance stays, then things could be a little different. But Kerala certainly is very difficult. I think the idea should be to see if the party can actually get 15% vote at all, and if not, then that probably will get deprioritized in the scheme of things. But the most important election, Aadit, is going on right now as we speak, as we record this, which is in Hyderabad. The GHMC poll is people are voting right now with the results on 4th. And that would be a very interesting election because after the bipolar win of BJP in the Dubaka seat, TRS basically advanced the GHMC poll. These are not on EVMs; these are local polls, so state decides and state election commission decides, and this is a poll on ballot paper. And even with that, if BJP, let's say, gets 30% vote and a few seats, it would actually be very interesting in terms of how Telangana shapes up. I think that is the next state to watch out for in terms of the
because one thing was that I think KCR was planning to be king in perpetuity in Telangana when it was formed in 2014. And what I think they were expecting is at least we'll get an uninterrupted rule of 15-20 years or something like that. And what has happened is that in the second term itself, I mean, he advanced the elections by 6 months in 2019 so as to them not to happen with the Lok Sabha, because he sort of felt that what happened in Odisha might happen in Telangana, where people might, at least in Lok Sabha, might vote for BJP. Ultimately, that did happen with 4 Lok Sabha seats going to BJP. So it's interesting. I'm going to do a very shameless plug here, but Sudhir Kumar has done a fantastic analysis on this on GHMC poll, which ironically the MP I was talking about, Dharmapuri Arvind, he had something to say on that piece as well, agreeing what KCR has done. And Suresh Kochetil did an analysis on the Dubaka Assembly poll, and why it is crucial is BJP was not expected to do well, but they ended up winning it by 10,000-11,000 votes. So it was not even like about 500 votes ki jeet ho gayi. It was still a narrow win, but still by a sizable chunk. So absolutely. Something that Mr. a certain American politician could not claim anything about it. So anyways, those jokes aside, coming to sort of the last part of it all is the national picture, right? It is no doubt that the BJP is in the ascendance nationally, but are we now, if they were to do not as good in Bengal or Tamil Nadu or Kerala, are we to see now that split verdicts are going to be more and more common in the months to come? Because then the BMC polls happen, the Delhi elections, everything.
Yeah, looks like, right? I mean, the voters seem to be making a distinction between the center and the state. Also, the issues seem very different. I think the tendency of using national issues for state polls potentially, I mean, of course, the parties still do that, but I don't think it will, people are much swayed by that beyond a point. People do want to talk about the issues which impact them. I think people do understand where the state government is now playing a role, which also, by the way, means that the accountability for the states will have to go up. Like a real popular CM will actually have to do some work and prove that they've done the work to get the votes the next time, because people seem to be very clear. Of course, if we go to this one nation, one election thing, which the Prime Minister has been talking about, which I'm guessing will effectively mean one nation, two election cycles, like what it happens in the US, where there's a presidential election plus one set of seats, and then of course there's a midterm type of a thing. So I'm guessing that is what the structure India wants to align with eventually. But I think it could be quite interesting, because then the midterm polls will become the barometer for popularity of both the center and the state governments. And that could be the right structure. Maybe if not one poll, 2 or 3 iterations is what India is headed towards. I think it's a good thing overall, where you also have the balance of anti-incumbency showing up, not just relying on one election only. at the same time, saving on cost, money, effort, all of that.
Yeah, because I don't support per se just one nation, one poll, but if you're talking about a US level system where you have 1 day or 1 month a year where all the elections take place, I would support that, because that would also mean that we are not in campaign mode all the time. We can actually get into governance mode.
Yeah.
So absolutely. But in the my last question to you, Ashish, is going to be in this. How do you see the reforms moving forward? Coming back to sort of completing the circle on the whole reforms bit, economic reforms, do you think that it's going to require, because we saw in the land acquisition bill, the first few months the Modi government tried to push it, the 1.2 in 2014, and it didn't go through, and they sort of have abandoned any ideas of introducing that. Do you see anything like that coming if they would do win these assembly polls?
See, my sense is that at this stage the government is far too popular and powerful in the both houses of parliament to actually back down. I mean, they are at 200, the 302, 303 Lok Sabha seats. Then Rajya Sabha 93 BJP members plus a few more seats will come for by polls, etc. due to the deaths of different people. So BJP plus a few other parties can easily get to 110, which is like the halfway mark effectively. Generally, I mean 122 is there, but Rajya Sabha is also never completed. So let's say they can easily get 110, 115 votes in Rajya Sabha also. So I don't see any major climb down from here happening on any bills. In fact, the land bill is probably the 2004 election for BJP supporters. The fact is that is the only time the government has backed down, and that is also because there was no majority in the Rajya Sabha then, right? So there was no point in pursuing it in 2014. And now with the policies about land pooling, etc., government has already bypassed it in the sense that it has delegated that task to states, saying you create the land pools and we will essentially promote it, rather than the central government trying to adjudicate every land acquisition per se. Absolutely. But people still hold it as an example because that is the only time government has actually backed down. There's no other contrast available. So I would say that a good number of tough reforms or tough bills have already passed since then. So there's no reason why they will back down on the agricultural bill. Definitely, there could be some enabling provisions around how the contracts are structured and how they are. Let's say what is the remedial mechanism for dispute resolution. Some of those changes may become more, let's say, friendlier to the states and potentially in that context. But I don't see the structure of the bills changing from here on. And not just that, I think there's a lot more which is to come. I mean, the budget is just 2 months away. 1st of Feb, in fact, exactly 2 months away from today. There could be many more things which might come in the budget itself in terms of the changes. So the reform momentum will continue, should continue. And I hope the government finally looks at a fiscal impetus for the salaried class, which is essentially the sore point has been so far.
So they've done a lot to summarize what Ashish was saying, that the cake is there. How much cherry?
Reduce my taxes. In simple terms, reduce the taxes.
No. The cake is there on the table. How much icing and how many cherries the government puts, maybe we'll know in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I mean the salaried class is only about, let's say, 8-10 crores in India, but they're also the most vocal people on Twitter, Facebook, etc. So you think that nothing has happened because their personal income tax slab has not gone down. So basically that's where the problem is.
Yeah. So there you go. If the powers to be are listening, maybe a reduction of income tax is always on the agenda. But now Ashish has put that in no uncertain terms. But before you go, Ashish, any recommendations you have for our listeners, viewers, for them, what to see, what to listen to?
Yeah, no, I've been reading this book, The India Way by India's Foreign Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar. Right. Very nicely articulated. Actually, it's a very nice book in the current times to understand, especially with the onslaught of British and Canadian celebrities and parliamentarians on Indian democracy. I think it's a good book to understand how the government today thinks about some of these issues and how they are prepared for some of it also, not getting too overwhelmed by these opinions. So I would highly recommend reading this book.
Absolutely. My recommendation would be a different book I just finished reading. It's on Indian spinners. I think Anindya Datta or something. I'm forgetting the author.
From the media or from cricket?
And it's good point from cricket. No, these are the actual spinners that we enjoy watching, not the ones we enjoy critiquing. Let's put it that way. Well, maybe we enjoy critiquing the spinners too, but basically it starts from the Palwankar Ballu, who was one of the first Indian spinners, and a most fascinating story that he was a Dalit in there, where he was not, initially allowed in certain places, to where he ended up leading a team that was sort of led by at that time it was completely dominated by Brahmins. So it was a very interesting sort of thing what happened to Anil Kumble, R. Ashwin, Yuzvendra Chahal, and all that. How the sort of things left. Of course, there is a little bit of the author's political lens or something, but if you just look past it, it's a fantastic book which recounts the history of Indian cricket. And it's for anyone who's from Mumbai, Maharashtra, you'll absolutely love it, because he just goes into the detail of how the Mumbai Pentagonal was happening, and the history of Mumbai cricket, what Gavaskar's role was, and so forth. So do read that, and maybe our current Indian cricketers have got to read, because looking at those performances in Australia, it looks pretty bad right now. And yeah, so that is one. And the second, my book would be there is a series that ABP News did in 2014 called Pradhan Mantri, where they actually did sort of from decades and critical events. Watch those events that happened in 91 and 98, because we've given a lot of references, and then Vajpayee's speech in 1996 and what it did and why it come. So from there, if you come to here, Indian democracy has only gotten stronger, and we've come a long way. So maybe the MPs raising doubts on that in Canada ought to watch these series to see how stronger Indian democracy is than where it was 30 years ago. So do watch it. But thank you so much, Aashish, for joining us this week. It was a pleasure. Great having you always.
Thanks, Aadit. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure. And you guys, please like us, follow us, on Twitter, Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be back very soon with more. Thank you.